You are now watching On Point, a news and public affairs show from California State University, Northridge.
Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm your host, Gabriel Duarte. As the semester gets underway, swiping credit cards left and right is an easy habit to pick up, and keeping track of finances can become a slippery slope, which is why it's important now more than ever to have a plan or a budget of sorts. Today, we'll be discussing a topic that has the power to transform the way you manage your money, financial literacy. And here to help us understand both sides of the coin, we have two guests. Our first guest currently works as a corporate and institutional banking credit analyst for Bank of Hope. He also has 3 years of experience working in capital markets. Joining us today is Camden Gardner. Our second guest is a screenwriting student here on campus. Like the everyday student, her expenses are vast and never-ending. Also joining us to get a student's perspective is Meredith St. John. Camden, Meredith, thank you guys for joining us today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Camden, let's start with you. Corporate institutional banking analyst, that's kind of a tongue twister right there. Tell me a little bit about your title and what you do there.
Yeah, it's a fair question. So essentially what I do is I evaluate the performance of companies that we're prospecting. We deal with a wide range of deals like Lionsgate for entertainment, fund finance, private equity. We also deal with entertainment, healthcare, syndicated lending, everything else in the middle.
And I was under the impression that you were a former CSUN student not too long ago, a CSUN graduate?
Yeah, I actually graduated last year, and I was an intern from a program that I found on campus, and that's how I got the job.
And talk to me a little bit about the topic of financial literacy. As a financials graduate from the campus of CSUN and as well as working into the finance world, tell me a little bit about your experience, if any, with financial literacy.
Yeah, that's a great question. Essentially, when I was going through college, I had 2 jobs and I was a full-time student. So I was working 7 days a week, and a big part of that was budgeting my money so I could afford to go to school and pay for my rent, all these fixed expenses that was attached to, living. So I had to do that, and I had to manage my variable expenses and the money that I had left over. I essentially had to deal with that if I want to put it towards my savings or if I want to spend it on discretionary spending, like going out to eat.
Meredith, you're a current student here. Talk to me a little bit about your understanding of financial literacy that you have.
Well, I feel like we contrast each other very well because for me, finance and literacy are completely separate. And, I'm a writer, so I'm a words person. And for me, keeping track of my finances or budgeting is really just like a game of kind of outrunning. And I think it's, unless you sit down and you literally learn about it or take some sort of course, you probably just watch your parents, or that's something that's inherited. So I just know the game of you got all the bills on the counter and you're sorting through them or whatever. And so I sort of am kind of playing the same game, hoping to come to understand budgeting a little bit better, but that's my wherewithal for now. And
budgeting such a, you kind of nailed it on the head, but budgeting such a huge topic when it comes to financial literacy. Do you currently budget, or have you had any experience budgeting in the past?
Yeah, so when I started college, I've been in college for about 6 years. So the first 4 years, I worked multiple jobs while I was a student. And at that time, I would, take percentages out for savings or, bills or whatever else. And now I'm unemployed. I am of the private student loan variety. And so now I'm just kind of without that disposable income, just, making my way, and I don't have as much forward movement with my money. So
you said it yourself, working 2 jobs. Talk to me a little bit about that and, trying to be able to balance not only having to, feed yourself, make sure you have, housing, but as well as, trying to keep your feet up and be a college student as well and working 2 jobs.
Yeah, it's really exhausting, and college in itself is a job. And I think when you don't have a lot of financial literacy, then there's a lot of anxiety around money and keeping it up. And for me, it was never really about saving for any long-term goal. When I was working and I was saving, it was mostly just okay, this is for rent. My savings was, okay, now I have rent to pay. So you can kind of always feel like you're playing some sort of game of catch-up.
Camden, I'll pose the same question to you. Do you, as someone who's, very experienced in the financial world, do you, as you were a college student and now, have any experience with budgeting, and do you currently budget?
Yeah, absolutely. Budgeting is crucial if you want to build a roadmap of financial stability. It's very easy to become encumbered with a lot of credit card debt or overspending just because you don't track it. So the goal is to track your income and your expenses and just find out how much money do I have left over, and if I have money left over, am I spending this on frivolous things instead of saving it?
You're making my job kind of easy, but talking about things that could rack up for someone's, financial expenses. You talk about a credit card debt, housing, things like that. As someone who's a finance professional, I should say, talk to me a little bit about the mistakes that you see from college students like me and Meredith that, are negatively impacting someone's financial awareness.
Yeah, for instance, when I first got my car, I didn't have a cosigner. And the reason it was so expensive is because I had a high interest rate for that reason. So what I had to do was pay a high interest rate on my car. And that was a tough learning example for me to learn from that scenario. So after 2 years, I was able to refinance it when I had a higher credit score and get better understanding of that. Yeah.
And Meredith, talk to me a little bit about some of the expenses you deal with. You kind of mentioned you're an unemployed student dealing with all the expenses that being a college student comes with. I know from my understanding you're a commuter.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, living in Los Angeles, gas, food, rent, all these things, I know that they can pile up. Talk to me about your experiences in dealing with this.
I guess I'm coming to learn that there's like a lot of benefit from remaining preventative, but the crazy thing about being an adult is that things just continue to happen. And, when you're managing the home, or like if an accident happens there, or like you're managing your car and an accident happens there, like I have to get tires this month and it's driving me crazy, just the whole operation of it. But also the fact that I guess I hadn't planned, all of a sudden it was like, oh no, I need new tires. And so I don't know, I guess I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, but I'm thinking that I am trying to learn a little bit more about how to like plan ahead for expenses that you're gonna have, instead of just like having them come at you all the time. And I think that, especially as a commuter who has to like maintain their car, that's definitely something that I want to work on.
A term we use is called adulting.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. Talk to me about, what it's like dealing with all these, not only the expenses, but the emotional aspect of things too. I know it could pile up and it could not only overflow yourself, but it could overflow into other things, school, work, things like that. How are you dealing with things, being able to pay rent, being able to make sure your car is running for school, things like that? How has that, affected your mental health, whether it be in a positive or a negative way?
I would say mostly negative. I think when I was working a lot of different jobs, sometimes 3 at a time, and I was in school, that can only sustain you for so long. And then I sort of reached like a level of burnout. And then now I would say I'm getting my financial aid, but I also need private loans to keep me afloat. And so in that regard, it's mostly just that it's kind of like, oh, am I going to get approved? When am I going to get approved? And so you're kind of playing this waiting game of like, you're reliant now on whatever the powers that be to like, okay, I'm going to keep going and hopefully get you through the rest of the semester.
Camden, as someone who was a financial student at CSUN and now, a financial professional, talk to me a little bit about your inner circle and was budgeting, financial literacy, were these things that you guys aware of in the bigger picture of things?
Yeah, I feel like me with most people, my family didn't really cover like financial literacy. So I was really going into college with zero knowledge beforehand of how all this works. And the way I learned was through, my peers, and we all learned the same thing together, and like outside sources and different people, and kind of looking up to them and seeing what they do. And it really is a process in order to like get there.
Would you say that being a student at CSUN helped you in any way understand, this is how I budget, this is how I improve my financial life to become more successful in the future?
Yeah, so CSUN did help me in some regards when it comes to classes, but I feel like it's more so the people that I met who had the same goals and the same aspects of like what we want to get done. And we kind of collided with that, and through that I was able to find like-minded people who cared about the same things as me.
Would you say that this is something that should be talked about more often, especially at the collegiate level where, students are, for the most part, young adults like all ourselves here who are, getting off into the financial world, learning to get full-time jobs and learning to spend adult money, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. So this is something that should be covered before college, in high school, when we're still like getting our footing right. Because when you're at college, you have student loans now, and now like you have rent, you have dorms, you have roommates, you have all these added expenses, and you really have no groundwork of like how can I like learn how to manage my finances and budget my money, and like you're not really taught that, so you kind of have to figure out as you go and have like the motivation to do that. Yeah.
Meredith, for you, I know as a college student, a screenwriting student, right, as well. Talk to me a little bit about this. Is budget, finance, literacy, are these things that you and your peers discuss? Is it something that's relevant in your everyday life, in your social life?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we mostly discuss it when we're just like complaining about the lack of funds. But I appreciate what Camden said about like, you know, learning early on before you get into college. And you would hope that like, if anything, you would learn at some point, and there should be like a more of a conversation around it in a general sense, because then you can, you know, hit the ground running once you enter the full adult world where you're like a working person and like hopefully not have to carry any baggage. But I feel like that's mostly what we talk about when we talk about finances, is like the baggage and how to like get rid of it, or like how to get rid of your debt, you know. So it definitely would have been very helpful for me, and probably like most students, to have that kind of education early on.
And do you feel like here at CSUN, do you feel currently that you're receiving, you know, adequate information, education to become, you know, more successful than you are currently right now in terms of financial literacy and budgeting?
You know, I feel like there's probably resources out there for that. I'm not aware at the school particularly, but I would really find that like interesting to have more conversations about it, especially here at CSUN too. That's definitely something like a resource I would want to take advantage of.
Camden, how often do you run into people similarly to Meredith who are just trying to outrun their bills and trying to survive, stay afloat, you know, get through college without having to worry about going into debt, worrying about not having enough money on the, you know, for food on the table, for housing and things like that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, that's most people really. You have so much going on in your life with school and trying to figure out what you want to do in life and all these things. You don't really think about the impact of like, oh, I have to take out this loan that's high interest, or I have to like forego working so I can go to school, and like all these little things add up. A lot of people go through the same issues.
And for Meredith, you know, do you feel like that financial literacy is important, just as important as, you know, maybe some of the education you're receiving currently?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like even when your budget's tight, and honestly, just from what I'm learning in this interview, is that you would probably be able to find ways to still keep afloat without having so many like, oh no, you know, crisis moments when it comes to your finances. Even though, you know, you might be a broke student, whatever. I think if we had more financial literacy, then we wouldn't have to worry so much, and there would be a larger margin of like error.
I think a big topic here today is, you know, inflation. I think that's one of the hugest issues that we deal with here today, especially in California. We have gas rising prices well above $5. You have eggs going well above $10. Do you feel like that this is something that impacts you on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. It's gotten to a point where I feel like the prices just keep running up. It's just an exponential growth rate, and like at that rate, I've kind of tried to adapt some like blissful ignorance, because it just keeps going, and so I'm just like, oh my God, I can't even. But the way that I think it's mostly something that you feel, like I feel the change more than I actually am writing down every day like how much the numbers are growing. I just know that my budget is like tighter and tighter and tighter like every week basically.
And when we talk about things like that, I mean, when you say tighter and tighter and tighter, do you feel like with inflation that your budget, because it seems to me that you do more of a little bit of on-the-fly budgeting rather than thinking things out. I'm going to, you know, at the beginning of the month, I'm going to do A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about how, when you do these things, do you take into account inflation?
I feel like it's more of an unconscious thing. Like I just know that I'm doing less than I was before, if that makes sense.
And that'll be all for this segment. Thank you guys for being with us here today. We're going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, we'll learn about how one financial literacy program is making a difference for adolescents across the country. Stick around. You're watching On Point.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. So if you want to talk to your kids, you have to get it trending.
No, you're doing it wrong.
Let's go.
Can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
Visit talkaboutvaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
A lethal dose is in here. Who gets it, I won't know.
Scary that it can be put into anything. We can't even see it or notice it.
I'm an actor in an ad reminding you that if you're high, just don't drive.
Welcome back to On Point. If you're joining us right now, we're discussing the importance of financial literacy. To help future generations avoid debt, high schools across the nation will be rolling out a financial literacy course to meet graduation requirements over the next few years. And one financial literacy program in Burbank is getting a head start.
I'm at JA Finance Park in Burbank, where it's hosting its annual financial literacy workshop. More than 100 students are engaging in real-life budgeting scenarios and learning how to properly manage their funds with the help of volunteers and faculty. JA Finance Park welcomes students to its interactive program over the weekend. During the 6-hour event, students learned essential financial literacy skills through real-world simulations with the guidance of volunteers. Students took on adult roles with careers, salaries, and financial responsibilities with practical scenarios created by the program. Based on their personalized, simulated identity, they made decisions on budgeting, saving, investing, and managing expenses in a realistic environment. Students engaged with volunteers as they visited the various storefronts offered in the building. The shared experience between volunteers and students creates a connection that makes participants return year after year.
I love the work that Junior Achievement does, and I've been actually working with them over the last 4 years.
Not only does the organization connect the community, but it also leaves a long-lasting impact for everyone involved. Since Junior Achievement was established 71 years ago, it has educated more than 312 million students nationwide. The workshop has made a lasting impact on alumni, enhancing their confidence in managing finances. It's given them practical skills for making informed financial decisions, setting them up for career success and financial independence.
I will get teachers from the Los Angeles area who will contact me wanting to bring their classes here because they themselves, as a middle or high schooler, did this program and really took away a lot from it. And 5, 10, 15 years later, remember the impact that it made on them and wanting to bring it to their own students.
JA Finance will continue to run throughout the spring semester. Reporting from Burbank, I'm Sor Gerritsen, On Point.
Thank you, Solor. We'll start with you, Camden. Camden, I'm aware that you were at the event. Tell us a little bit about how that event went, and I believe that you were a volunteer as well. Tell us about your experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a fun event. We showed up at 7 a.m. to get our training from the advisors. Went through that. It was a full course. Essentially, you saw in the video, they have a scenario budget, say like it's a family of 2, and they have the family, all this stuff in their budgets. Essentially, you walk the kids through like how to budget their money and how to allocate all these things, and walking them through these expenses and kind of talking to them and leading them through the different various storefronts. But it was very rewarding.
Meredith, do you feel like that you would have benefited from something like this way back in middle school and even into high school, really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you're supposed to get out of high school and then go be an independent person, although that's not at all what happens most of the time. So I think it's really interesting to have models and workshops and courses where people can feel more well-rounded in their existence.
Camden, they talk about a younger audience, middle schoolers. Is that really necessary to involve someone as young as 10, 11, 12? Do you think that starting them off at a young age like that is more than not beneficial to the rest of their lives?
It really is, because they need that solid foundation of financial literacy when they're first starting out. Because if they don't, they're going to go throughout life being frivolous and spending their money, not really keeping track of what they're doing with their money. So it's very important.
And talk to me a little bit about the attendance of the event. It looked like there was more than a lot of people there, a handful of people, younger people, older people.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy, there were a lot of people. I think it was 100 kids in total. There were volunteers. With my bank, we actually had a bank volunteer event, so there's about, I think, 15 of us there, then additional volunteers. And then the people with JA Finance have about, I think, 20 people involved as well.
And talk to me a little bit about, you said people from your company went. Mm-hmm. Was this something that you guys look forward to, helping give back to the youth, promoting something as valuable as financial literacy?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I think us as a bank, we have a financial skill set, and it's good to teach kids that are young how to be properly equipped to handle the world going in.
Meredith, do you feel like when we talk about events like this, do you feel like if we had one at CSUN that would be extremely valuable and perhaps have a huge output of students?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely attend.
And tell me why you would attend.
Because I would like to foster some sort of relationship with my money, I think, yeah.
Do you think that having these in-person experiences being able to really firsthand see, I mean, obviously not a toy storefront like we saw in the video, but having real experience, having people really tell us how it is and things like that of that nature, would that be beneficial to you?
Oh, absolutely. I've looked up articles and YouTube videos, whatever, about budgeting or managing your finances, and it's still not getting through, because I think it's really having someone like sit next to you and being able to ask questions to a real person that's gonna help you the most.
Now I got a saying here. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And when you talk about financial literacy for someone especially like my age, you know, it's hard to understand these things when you're used to spending $10, $20 here on McDonald's, on fast food, on, you know, maybe you got to go get some gas real quick because you're commuting so far. Would things like that, would it be beneficial for you to have a better understanding from a younger age, and instead of, you know, us being the age we are right now, a similar age group, being able to automatically transition, because all of a sudden, like you said, we're going to step into an even more independent world after we graduate from college. Do you feel like it would have been more beneficial to you to be able to learn this as a high school or middle school student?
Yeah, I think from what I'm hearing, like in our conversation, it sounds like a lot of managing your finances is kind of like crafting a lifestyle as well. And so that definitely would have helped me to have an understanding of like how to live as like a financially literate person, instead of just, you know, money is like a separate endeavor, like it's integrated in your life as well.
Camden, what were some of the most popular questions you heard throughout the event?
Yeah, it's a very steep learning curve. There's a lot of misconceptions where people think they want to buy a car that has an $800 per month car payment, very nice car, when they can't afford their rent in this scenario. So that was a big issue, and kind of reshaping that mindset to be like, okay, let me see like what I need to take care of first, and after that it's the discretionary spending. But one question that was really inquisitive a kid asked was, if I have $5,000, should I buy a car new outright or should I finance it? And you know, there's a few options with that, but the answer that I gave, it's better to finance it, because you want to save that money in case there's emergencies. And also, in order to build your credit, you have to take out a loan. So if you do have a co-signer, it's nice to take out a loan and kind of build your credit doing that, just so you can put your money to other things.
And what was it like dealing with, you know, middle school and high schoolers, you know, at this event? Were they engaged? Were they paying attention? Were they, you know, active and searching out to learn this information?
Yeah, I mean, going in, I thought they'd be disconnected, but they're actually very connected with me. Like, they're sponges. They actually wanted to know these things, and they're very engaged in our conversations, and they're asking the right questions.
And it may not be from you, but what were some of the most helpful tips that were thrown around at the event?
Some of the most helpful tips that are thrown around, I would say taking out credit cards. Credit cards are very important to building your credit when you're young. One thing you could do for your kids is open a credit card when they're first born, so it accrues, your credit score is going to go up. Because one of the big important parts of it is how long is your credit history. So if you have it from when you're first born, that's just setting your kids up for success. But essentially, like credit cards, taking out credit cards, especially for CSUN, there's a student card that has 0 annual fee, and that's a great way to build your credit while you're young.
And Meredith, were you aware of any such student credit card that has 0 interest fee?
I was not, no.
And do you feel like if the school promoted things like this, being able to open up a credit card when you're first born, having a credit card open when you get into college, maybe that would be a little bit more useful for students. Do you feel like things like this would be more beneficial if the school told you and was more proactive in getting the word out, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like, you know, students of any kind, like they just want to be acknowledged that like you're there if you have a need, and like you know, Camden said the students were like sponges, and I think like ultimately as long as you're enthusiastic about like introducing them to something that's going to be helpful, they're going to be interested in it no matter what.
So basically, if you're interested in something, then you feel like that they definitely come to the event or whatever it may be.
Yeah, like I'm not a numbers person, but if it's valuable to my life, I'm going to immediately start making those connections about how it exists in my world. And yeah, I think that's nice.
And for you personally, do you have any credit card debt? Is this things that you deal with?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a little bit of debt, we'll just say that, but yeah.
And do you feel like if you attended a workshop or maybe something on campus to help you stay informed, that it would be more beneficial to you to help for future prospects and, you know, dealing, maybe you open up another credit card and you have an idea of what you're going to do and a plan with it? Would that have been more beneficial to you if you knew about this, you know, prior to opening up your first account, I should say?
Absolutely, yeah, because I really got a credit card and I didn't know how to manage it, and I was also like unemployed and looking for a job when I first got a credit card, which is not a great time to get one. But yeah, just having somebody kind of coach me through those things would have been very helpful.
And Camden, for you, is this quite often something you see a lot in students, credit card debt, reckless, I wouldn't say recklessly, but spending, debt without knowing the term to pay it back, the plan to pay it back, having a plan and things like that?
Yeah, it's very easy to live beyond your means, especially if you have access to a credit card where you just swipe it and then you worry about the interest later. But really, credit cards are around 20 to 30% interest. So this is really gonna hurt you in the long run. What I would say is put your normal expenses like your gas or your car, whatever it may be, groceries, and then pay it off right away just to build your credit, build credit card points and do that.
And do you feel like putting these everyday expenses, gas, food, would rent be included into that? How would you go about navigating that?
So you could put rent on it, but you can't because they charge you a fee on top of it, so it's not really worth it for the credit card points.
Makes sense. So, and Meredith, for you, talk to me about what it's like going through, everyday life, knowing, I think the term you said was outrunning. Mm-hmm. That's a perfect term to say it. Outrunning your next bill, outrunning your next purchase, outrunning whatever it may be. Talk to me a little bit about that and how financial literacy could put it all to waste if it all comes together.
Yeah, I think the most difficult part is crafting a plan. And now I'm finally about to branch out into the world. And so I would like to recover my sense of autonomy over my life, which is often related to your money and how you manage it.
Exactly.
So it's kind of, for me, just about finding the right plan. And I haven't really been able to do that because I don't know much about finances.
And talk to me a little bit about your graduation date. Are you expected to graduate in the spring of 25?
Yeah, I'm supposed to graduate this spring.
And Camden, as someone who just recently graduated, what was your plan for immediately graduation? Did you have something set where you knew, I'm going to get a job, and I'm going to put money away, and I'm going to do this, that, and the other? Or was it more of, I'm going to get a job, and we're going to see what goes from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. My plan was use my skill set to try to get a job wherever I can, whether it's in Dallas or in California, whatever it is. And then once I have that salary and money I have recurring, then I could plan out my finances after that. Because when you're budgeting, you want to budget based off of what you're making right now. So if I expect to get a job in the future, I want to be able to budget for that future job and the money surrounding that job.
And Meredith, do you have any current plan in place when, I know you like to say that you take things one day at a time, but do you have anything in plan for, moving forward with learning about how to navigate your finances and, once you get a job to go from there?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm planning to teach, and so I'm hoping that through that sense of stability and consistency, I can craft something around that.
Well, guys, I think we had a really good conversation, really productive. I learned a lot from you, Camden, especially in the terms of finance. As a journalism student, it's quite tricky to navigate, but I really do appreciate both of you for coming in today and taking the time to join us. Before we wrap up, we want to remind students that the CSUN Vita Clinic at the Nazarian College of Business and Economics offers low-cost assistance to students who need help with finances. You can find more information on their website. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on On Point.